Hi, this is John Ryan, and today's date is 27 November 2011, and I'm with my mother, Martha Ryan, and we're going to do a short interview reminiscing about different things in the past. First off, I was reviewing last year's interview with my mom, and we talked about roller coasters briefly, but there was actually a mistake in the roller coaster comment. Instead of actually a roller coaster, you have been on
a Ferris wheel.
which makes more sense. I just can't picture my mom on a roller coaster. Can you picture my mom on a roller coaster, Evelyn?
No, not actually, but she could be like.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
I think I've inherited no big desire for roller coasters from my parents. At least it's not something I particularly enjoy. But today we're going to focus a little bit on teaching. And I was listening to NPR, and they were focusing on teachers. They were suggesting you interview one of your favorite teachers for the National Day of Listening. But instead, I thought I'd talk to my mom a little bit about teaching. And my first question is, why did you decide to become a teacher?
I think part of it was because, like many oldest children in the family, I got involved with teaching people how to do things, and it was really about the only thing I ever considered, although briefly I thought about journalism when I was early in high school. And one of the things that I like about my career as a teacher is that I always liked it. The reason I think I started out there is when I was, from the time I was 10 on, I was in 4-H, and a lot of the things we did there involved teaching people how to do things. But I always say that I taught in 6 decades and two centuries, and I always liked my job. And when I would tell my students that, they would just shake their heads and roll their eyes because they couldn't imagine anyone liking being a teacher. I felt very lucky that I was.
Oh, but that was nice to head off to college with a clear, sense in your mind. I am going to college. I am going to become a teacher.
Right. Although while I was in college, I took some other things too that were kind of related. And I've always been glad that I had kind of a minor in television. And the reason I did that was I could look ahead a little and see how television was going to be used in the classroom. And now, of course, people would be looking at how the internet was going to be used and is being used in the classroom, that computers are being used.
And that was pretty cutting edge. I remember you talking a little bit about the television show that they produced while you were going to Iowa State. And we're talking like 1955 to 59. So television was still pretty much in its infancy at that point.
Well, in fact, one of the interesting things about that is I never lived in a home where there was a TV. But Iowa State had a television station on campus, and because they were a university that did science and math and stuff, that was one of the things that they looked ahead. I audited a class on slide rule because the university was, although at that time it was a college, was going to start doing that class using television. And so for a couple of terms I went to slide rule and made notes and diagrams of what the teacher did. Never learned a thing about the slide rule. And of course it became obsolete shortly after that anyway. So
that's funny. You were a home ec teacher.
Yes.
Now, how did you decide that was what you wanted to specialize in?
I think again the 4-H background was part of that. And when I was in high school, I went to a conference on the Iowa State campus. I had never taken a class in home economics until I went there, because the high school that I went to had maybe 1 or 2 classes in that, but I was in a college prep program, and so I didn't have time to take any of those classes at that time.
Yeah. So you got married right after college, 1959.
Right.
Made the big move to rural Brooklyn, Iowa. Didn't even actually live in the town. Lived outside the town.
Actually, we lived in town.
Oh, that's right. You did.
For a few months, less than a year.
Mm-hmm. But your first teaching assignment, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, my first teaching assignment was in Guernsey, Iowa, which was about 10 miles from Brooklyn. And I got the job, noticed an ad in the Des Moines paper, and went and applied for it. And I think the big reason that they hired me was because they were under an indictment to offer a vocational class. And so home economics was a vocational class. And I also, because of the other courses I'd taken, I was certified to teach science and English. And so I taught home economics, English, and science, and directed the school play.
What was the school play?
I don't remember. There were 29 students in the high school.
This is for all four grades?
For all 4 grades, and that was the last year that it was open.
Yeah.
And when I went to apply for the job, your grandmother was certain that they would not hire me because I was Catholic, because she had experienced that kind of prejudice when she was being a teacher when she was younger. And so when I did the interview, one of the questions they asked me was where I had gone to high school. And so I told them, I said I went to Ottumwa Heights Academy, and that is a Catholic girls' school, because I wanted to get it right out there that I was a Catholic. And the other thing that happened to me was at that time, teachers had to negotiate their own salary. And your dad and I had talked about how much I should ask them. If they asked me how much I wanted to earn, what the number would be. So I said $4,000. And that's what they paid me. And that was one of the higher salaries of people in my class. And it's also one of the reasons that I am such a strong believer in teachers' unions, because several years after that, Iowa became one of the first states to have organized teachers' unions, and the salaries were decided ahead of time, because it was very irritating to me that a man my age was working at the same school and making quite a bit more money than I was.
Well, he was just a better negotiator, though.
Well, he was a coach. And it was okay that they paid him more money for coaching, but I don't think they should have paid him more money for teaching.
Okay. Well, we're going to interrupt this interview for a special guest questioner. Evelyn Ryan, my daughter, age 6, has a question.
What was your favorite student?
Oh, wow.
Who was your favorite student of all time? Even from Guernsey High School all the way to Mojave High School. You're talking 6 decades of teaching. That's got to be a difficult question.
I don't know that I can say a favorite student. I liked kids. I always liked my students. Some of them you remember more so than others because they were paying attention and that type of thing. And of course, your dad was my student very briefly, and that was a challenging experience for him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
in Guernsey, did the boys have to take home ec too?
No.
No, that would just be too much. I mean, here we have Guernsey being rather progressive, allowing a Catholic teacher, but certainly having boys take home ec would just be that is just a bridge too far for Guernsey.
That happened in the 70s when vocational classes could no longer be gender-based. It was part of the Americans for Disability Act type thing that came around that time. But and Brooklyn, which became BGM, Brooklyn Guernsey Malcolm, they began offering shop and home economics to both boys and girls in the early 70s.
Can you think back to think about some of the things you taught at home ec that people would just go, oh, that's sexist. I can't believe that you guys taught that back then.
No, not really. One of the things that I think about today is the real need that's evident in our economy about people who don't know how to prepare food. That's one thing. And I just recently came across a book on sewing techniques. It was written in 1943, which I'm finding very fascinating. But I think that there's a need now to teach those skills in home management again, because people don't have them. And one of the things that's evident today that would be very helpful is food labeling, where you have ingredients that are in foods. You also have unit pricing, so people could be figuring out not only what the nutrition level is, but also how much it's costing to prepare.
Well, you know, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. Whether I'm trying to think, maybe I had something in one of my classes about that, but I think it's something I did on my own, you know, just kind of as an engineer. I'm like, you know, looking at the different sizes of packages and trying to, you know, do the conversions in my head to say which one is cheaper than the other. And I was just with Carol Nevlin at the grocery store the other day, you know, comparing I can't remember what it was, the different prices for some things, to say, hey, no, this one's a ripoff. This is actually more expensive, even though it looks cheaper, because the size is smaller. It's not the same size as the other one.
And they're actually generic brands are much more common now than they were in the past. And a lot of people just skip over those when, if you know anything about the way products are produced, they're exactly the same thing. So they're usually a better buy.
Yeah. So you taught at Guernsey for 1 year, and then I'm guessing Julie was born, and then at that time it was full-time.
And actually, because the school was being reorganized, our doctor, who was on the Brooklyn School Board, had told them that I would not be available to teach because I was having a baby.
Oh, that was nice of him to let them know that wouldn't be feasible. Of course, that'd be interesting to get
that just didn't happen.
The time frame at which point they said, you know, well, we can't hold pregnancy against a potential teacher.
And again, the 60s had a lot to do with that. From 1960 to 1974, I was a substitute teacher at several schools in Poweshiek and Tama County. And I liked doing that because it was about the only way I could afford to get out of the house. And I earned some cash money, which in part with farming is very helpful. Right. And then in 1975, I started teaching home economics part-time at BGM, which I did until 1986. And that worked out very well because it allowed me to get some teaching experience and some cash money. And it also, I negotiated health insurance coverage, which we did not have up until that point. And then in 1986, about the time that I was going to have a lot of time, since Dan was going off to school, they eliminated my position. And so I was really up a creek. I didn't know what I was going to do. I investigated several other possibilities. And then the school, Mr. Munson asked me if I'd be interested in teaching special education, since they were losing their long-time special education teacher. And so I thought about it, and why not? Special education students took a lot of vocational courses, so I was familiar with teaching them. So I started going to UNI to get certified to be a special education teacher. And one of the first teachers I had there gave me some of the best advice I've ever had. He told me, get your master's. He says, you're going to work really hard, you might as well get paid for it. And so instead of just taking the 12 to 15 hours I needed to be a special ed teacher, I started working on my master's degree, which I got in 1989.
So for those 3 years, did you also teach special ed then at BGM?
Yes, I taught from 86 to 90. I taught a resource room, students grades 9 through 12, and that worked out very well. I liked it, and the way that I ended up here was that in early 1990 or the fall of '89, I can't remember which, we came to Las Vegas to watch Matt Muehlbach play UNLV. Arizona played UNLV. And shortly thereafter, I was on the campus in Cedar Falls and had picked up the student newspaper and saw an ad for the Clark County School District. Was going to be interviewing in Iowa for teachers to come to their growing school district. And so I was afraid that your father was going to start wanting to go to Scottsdale in the wintertime. And I did not want to go to Scottsdale and play bridge, so I thought, well, maybe I'll go to this interview. So I did, and was over in Cedar Rapids. And after I did the interview, the guy that interviewed me said,
Second here. Hello? Hey, is this Alexi? Hey, Alexi, I'm going to call you back. I'll call you back. Yep, bye. Sorry for the interruption there. But going back, you had the interview?
I had the interview, and after the interview, the guy told me, he said, unless your recommendations are really terrible, you're hired. Because he says, we really need special education teachers, and my age, 53, was not a factor. And so that's how we ended up in Las Vegas.
There wasn't any kind of discussion between you and Dad? I mean, I'm just looking back now, I guess that's 21, 22 years ago, and I was just, and I'm sure all my siblings, half the town of Brooklyn, I think everyone was kind of floored with the idea that Doyle and Martha are moving to Las Vegas, and it really wasn't a full-on move. It was more of a full-on move for you because Dad was still farming, but
we came with the idea that we'd try it, because I knew I could always find another job in Iowa without any trouble. And so we came with the idea that we'd try and see how it worked.
So that was, in some respects, I mean, you had the adventure of going to college, and, but Brooklyn, Iowa wasn't too much different from rural Ottumwa. So, I mean, this was a big move, a big step for you.
But it was energizing. I think it came at a point in my life where it was something new, and I was ready to try it. I had a lot of trouble the first 6 months adapting to the students and the environment. I had a lot of help from colleagues, and I had to learn to spend time by myself again, although I had started my married life pretty much by myself, because shortly after we got married, Doyle got his notice to report for duty in the Army. He had requested duty over the wintertime, but they hired him they notified him about 6 weeks after we got married that he needed to report like the 15th of August to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So, there were a lot of changes there. But I think one of the things is that when you're young, you can adapt to all these things. But I was pleased with the way we adapted to living in Las Vegas. Your dad had to make a lot of changes, manage his farming stuff from a distance and that type of thing. But we made the changes, and it's been fun.
And it's not a decision you guys have regretted.
No, definitely not. Especially as we age and we appreciate the value of the dry climate on our bodies. But that has made a big, huge difference in how well we feel. And we think about how we could have stayed stuck in the middle of nowhere in rural Iowa like so many of our contemporaries have done.
Right. So you taught in 2 school districts here in Las Vegas, or 2 schools in Las Vegas. It's all one big, huge, humongous school district. You taught at Rancho High School first, and then at Mojave High School, correct?
Right. And the reason they picked me to teach at Rancho, which is an inner city school with a lot of gang issues and that type of thing was because when I was at UNI, I had done a practicum at Eldora, Iowa, where they had what was called the Reform School, where young people who had been in trouble with the law went to school, and I had done a practicum there, and they thought at Rancho that kind of fit in. Also, the inner city schools got first pick of the new hires, and so that's why I taught there. At that time, it was the last year before the district had started building all the new high schools, so it was a very overcrowded school. There were 3,500 students there, which was twice the size of Brooklyn.
And I remember actually going there, and you taught in a trailer.
Well, I taught in all kinds of different classrooms because I didn't have a classroom. My books and stuff were on a cart, and I went around the campus and taught there. And I was kind of under the impression that things weren't going to get much better. So that spring, when they had all the new schools opening, I applied at a school in this area where we live now, not knowing that I should have notified my assistant principal that I was doing this. And once she found out, somebody had called her about me, she called me in and she says, "Please don't leave." She says, "We really need you." She says, we want you to be our department coordinator next year. And things will be a lot different next year, she said. We'll be a lot smaller and won't be so hard. So I did that, and I was very glad that I did. I stayed there because I liked working there. I liked the kids. Kids that are in a situation like that figure out real quick teachers that like them and want to be there. And so I like teaching them.
Yeah. Was there some trepidation, about teaching at an inner city school and how rough it is? I mean, that's a long ways from Brooklyn or even Eldora, for that matter.
Well, I wasn't aware of that when I started there. Shortly, because I had no idea what a gang was, no clue. But I was never frightened or perturbed about any of that type of thing. Once the kids were on campus, they pretty much did what you wanted them to do. The crowding was hard, and it was hard to see students who had so little material things. That was hard. And one of the things that was hardest for me was that my students were not as advanced as my Iowa students. And one of my colleagues pointed that out to me. He says, spend more time on each section that you're teaching and work on their reading skills and this type of thing, because most of the kids that I had in Iowa could read pretty well and that type of thing, and students there could not, a lot of them.
How often do you ever occasionally run into some kids that you teach, just in some strange places, or? Rarely,
but I have, and I'm still mentoring a young woman that I taught at the second school that I taught at, mostly because it just worked out. She had asked me for some references and that type of thing, and so I enjoy her company. Once in a while you'll run into somebody. I know there's a girl that works at the place where I go to get my to get x-rays done. She wasn't a special ed student, but she worked in the cafe, and so I see her once in a while. I see somebody. But in Iowa, of course, she taught two generations in the same family,
right?
Because the students lived in the same house all their lives. But that's rare here.
Yeah.
Oh wow, Evie.
We got another break in the action here. As Evie has a drawn picture of the Ryan family, the John Ryan family.
Very well done. Very well done.
Yeah. So.
Very nice.
And you had a cafe. You mentioned that briefly. That was a big thing too at the Mojave High School.
Yes. One of the things that we did was I applied for a grant at the second high school that I worked at, Mojave High School, to run a cafe, because the new high school was in an area where students could not look for jobs because there weren't too much in that area. And so I got a grant to open a cafe, and we ran the Rattler Cafe for 3 years, which was a coffee shop, and the students learned things like how to organize a business, how to work in a business, and that type of thing. It was very successful. I enjoyed it. The kids liked it. And one of the nice things about it was that we worked with regular education and special education students. It was a very good experience.
All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up here, I guess. If you had to do it all over again, would you have, wow, what if I'd been a reporter or something? Where would I be today? Have you ever?
I just feel very lucky that my life has turned out the way that it did. Like I said, I always liked teaching.
Yeah.
And I feel very lucky that that's what I ended up doing. And it's been fun to live in different places, and I like the Brooklyn area, and I like it here.
Yeah. All right. Till next year.
What? Next year?
Unless you have a question, Carol.
Okay. What is the weirdest thing you've ever seen on the farm?
What is the weirdest thing you've ever seen on the farm?
Probably when we had a tornado, and we looked up the next day, and the building that we had just put up was gone.
Is this the second time it happened, or the first time?
I can't remember. The first time, I think.
Well, the first time I was there. I mean,
okay.
And I guess this is me telling the story now. But I will never forget watching an NBA basketball game and Richard Ross driving up our driveway, knocking on the door and saying, "Johnny, what's that pole building for?" And I'm like going, "Why is Mr. Ross asking about our new barn?" I said, "Well, we're going to store big round hay bales in it, and we're going to have farm equipment." No, it's gone. And sure enough, it was gone. So that night, went over there, and sure enough, the building was gone. It had blown up over the old schoolhouse into the hayfield. But that's a story for another time, and maybe we'll have Dad tell Mr. Ross stories.